Hello and good morning. Welcome to FSB's launch of the Confidence Code, our flagship AI report. And welcome. I'm Craig Beaumont. I'm Executive Director at the Federation of Small Businesses. And thank you all for joining us for our webinar. We're delighted to have so many people register for this. We've got nearly 700 registrations, which is fantastic. And if everyone watching today leaves with just one thing, it's probably not an AI tool or a new piece of software. It's a little bit more confidence to experiment with AI, confidence to ask questions, and confidence to take the next step. Now, when FSB published our first report on AI, which was in 2023, it felt like something on the horizon for many small firms. A minority of them had dipped a toe in. But fast forward to today, and it's become a recommended or even an essential business tool, helping with everything from marketing, administration, product development, customer service, and exporting. In fact, it's hard to see how we'll get economic growth without AI. So today there is a sense that this horizon is now rushing towards us, but it's quite hard to see what will happen in the future. And hopefully today we will make some sense of that. So small business owners in this, I think, are pretty well placed. They are agile risk takers. They see benefit of early mover advantage. But while opportunities are huge, so are the questions we face. And in fact, one statistic from MIT really stood out to me from Ileana, who you're going to hear from shortly, is that as many as 95% of AI projects fail to meet their aims, not due to algorithms or models, but due to the quality and extent of data. So perhaps the challenge here isn't whether AI has potential, it's how small businesses can unlock that potential confidently, safely, and practically. And that's what today's discussion is about. So what you're going to hear, we're going to hear the latest findings from FSB's new AI research, which was published yesterday. So we'll meet small business owners, FSB members who are already putting AI to work in very different ways. And you'll have the opportunity to put your own questions. We've already been given 135 questions in advance, so you're clearly a very active and interested, engaged audience. That's fantastic. But you'll have the opportunity to put your own questions to our speakers using the Q&A function in Zoom, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen through the session. So I'm delighted to welcome our guests today. First, the Right Honourable Rishi Sunak MP, former Prime Minister, current Member of Parliament, someone who's been a leading voice internationally on the opportunities presented by artificial intelligence. And we're also joined by Ileana Pearce, FSB's policy advisor on AI and technology and the author of our report called The Confidence Code. So just one note before we begin, while Rishi has been very supportive of our work and today's discussion, he doesn't, of course, endorse every recommendation contained within the report. He's not written that, but we are very interested in what he might say about it. So with that, it's my pleasure to hand over to Ileana to take us through the key findings from the Confidence Code. So Ileana, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Craig. Yeah, really exciting timing, especially as for the first time, we now have a minister attending cabinet responsible for AI, and of course, our tech and AI adoption report published yesterday. So I'll just dive straight in. The kind of headline finding, if you like, from this report is that now over half of small businesses are using AI. Potentially not a big surprise to lots of those on the call, but actually it's a really significant rise. Last time we asked our members about this for our 2024 report, 1 in 5 were using AI, and now it's the majority. What we see really driving this are the kind of ways of using AI, the things that you could use a kind of publicly available LLM or chatbot for. So some of the things that Craig outlined, including drafting and editing written content, emails, reviewing and summarizing documents, meeting notes, that kind of thing. We also see a sizable minority using AI for those more kind of innovation or revenue focused functions. So things like generating ideas, building new products and services, something we'll hear a bit more about later, and also making better use of a business data to understand kind of customer needs, where a market might be going. When we look at the kind of specific sectors for this, we see that those sectors who are pulling ahead, last time we asked about this, so that's the turquoise there, those who are kind of like 34, 37%, they're still pulling ahead with the purple for this report data. Those sectors who had like lower adoption rates a couple of years ago, so looking here at construction, manufacturing, wholesale and retail, they have made significant strides. So construction all the way from 1% up to 42% of small businesses using this tech, but still lower levels of adoption than some of the other sectors that we looked at. So something that we were really keen to look at in this report was what's the actual impact that AI is having for small businesses that have adopted it. What we saw is that of those who've adopted AI in the last 12 months, the average impact on their revenue was an increase of 3%. But actually, once we kind of looked underneath this, what we find is that just under a quarter are actually seeing any revenue impact at all. So 3/4 of small businesses who are adopting AI are actually not seeing any increase in their revenue as a result. Another really interesting thing we found is that there's a strong link between those using AI for those more kind of like innovation and revenue focused impacts that, or uses that we just spoke about, and the actual impact on their revenue. So those using AI for things like developing new products and services actually saw an average increase in revenue of 5%. So there's clearly something here to the not just adopting AI, which I think is where we were at with our previous report, but actually the kind of the how of the adoption in this space. And actually, when we ran the numbers, we found that there's a really significant kind of prize here for the UK economy. So if small businesses who are already using AI could increase the impact of their use by 50% and the number of small businesses not using AI can be halved, then the UK economy stands to gain 42 billion every year. And then, of course, kind of beneath, like within that, the really kind of significant potential impacts for small businesses. So the real question that we're looking at with this report is the kind of what's holding small businesses back, what's taking small businesses from being in that 3/4 who are not seeing any revenue impacts from AI to the 24% seeing really significant impacts. There are two things that we think are underlying this. One of them is kind of concerns, really kind of real challenges that small businesses see when they're looking at using AI in their business. And actually where we see that over 90% of small businesses, so 92% now have some sort of concern about AI. Some of the top challenges here are concerns about inaccurate responses, concerns about how their data is going to be handled by AI providers, also concerns about things like intellectual property, and actually also a sizable minority, almost a third of small business owners concerned about legal liability. So if something goes wrong with an AI tool that's not their fault, is their business going to be sued, is the kind of thing that we're looking at here. Also, be it small businesses on the call, no doubt be pleased to hear that we have some more kind of immediately actionable insights from this report. And in particular, we looked at what those small businesses that were in that group that are seeing really significant impacts from AI, what are the common themes? What are they doing to achieve this impact? And we saw a few things that came out really clearly. So they were more likely to have gathered ideas and feedback from employees, more likely to have provided training, more likely to have developed a plan for implementation. So kind of bringing people along and having an idea of where they want to go with the technology, and also more likely to have an AI policy in place. So a policy so that the business owner, their staff, and also potentially clients know how they're expecting to use this technology. And of course, this is a policy report, so we have it's full of recommendations to government. Those who are interested, recommend going and having a look at that report directly, because there's lots more than I've got here. But just to pick out a few of the kind of key recommendations that we're making, calling for regulation of large tech firms. So, and specifically here, we're talking about upstream regulation of large tech firms. So they're required to mitigate the risks presented by AI in relation to its use in business contexts. There's lots of thinking about protections for citizens, but what does this look like for small businesses using this tech? Also for calling on government to introduce a code of practice to help employers to engage with their staff when they're bringing in AI, because that's something we know is particularly helpful. And also to publish a set of AI model cards with the key information about the most widely used tools so that small businesses can make a kind of really informed choice. So thank you very much, and back over to you, Craig. Oh, you're on mute, Craig.
Oh, hi, sorry about that. Some muting issues. Hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you very much, Ileana, for that. We've got a question from Tracy about how to secure access to the report. So if you go on to fsb.org.uk, and our policy reports are all listed there, and the confidence code, this report is right at the top of that. Thank you to all our members that filled in our survey work that led to the report. We're really grateful for all members that do that. That gives us a really good snapshot of where small businesses are today. Just thinking about the sectors, that graph you showed of the sectors, the different sectors and different adoption rates is really good to see. AO use is up, concerns are up, though, as well on accuracy and data. And that £42 billion figure is the prize that's available if we get this right. I'm now delighted to invite Rishi Sunak to share his opening reflections. So over to you, Rishi.
Perfect. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Ileana. Good morning, everybody. What a treat it is to be with you today. So appreciate you all making some time. Uh, I grew up in a small business. My mum set up her own pharmacy when I was 11 or 12 years old. And it being a family business, we all had to chip in. So that was the only way, as many of you know, the only way you can make these things work. And as a teenager, I spent my life delivering prescriptions, helping with the books, working in the shop. And so I know firsthand just the sheer dedication and commitment that goes into making any small business work. But I also know how much AI can help you. I often think about my mum, who's now retired, and thinking about how today's tools would have made her life so much easier. Stock keeping, accounting, deliveries, all of it will have been quicker and just a little bit less hassle and stressful for her with this technology. And I think she would have been able to do so much more as a result, and size wouldn't have been such an obstacle to her wanting to scale. Now, since I've left Downing Street, one of the things I've really focused on doing is helping small businesses, like many of you on this call, benefit from this new technology. And I'm firmly of the view that AI can be your superpower, allowing you to grow and to do things that you never would have dreamed of before. Now, like this steam engine, electricity, or indeed the PC, AI is what we call a general purpose technology. And that means it can and will transform every aspect of our economy. Now, with all new technology, of course, there's always a lot of hype. But when someone as thoughtful as Sir Demis Hassabis, the founder of Google DeepMind and a proud Brit, says that he thinks AI is going to be 10 times bigger than the Industrial Revolution and happen in perhaps a tenth of the time, I really think you've got to sit up and listen. Now, when it comes to AI, adoption is everything. We're only going to see the benefits of this technology that if we actually use it, as much as there is all this focus on the latest model and the latest benchmark, it's going to be those countries and those companies that adopt, who are ultimately going to end up being the biggest winners. But we as a nation are not going to succeed unless we get all of you to adopt this technology. As we heard from Craig and Ileana, SMEs are half of our economy, and we simply can't afford for you and others to be left out of this productivity revolution. Now, historically, small businesses have been slower to adopt new technologies. All of you are crammed for time, managerial bandwidth, which is why when we've had previous cycles like cloud computing or automation, the take up has been slower than it has been at big firms. So we can't let that repeat with AI, and we've got to help you adopt it, not uncritically or wholesale, but in ways that actually deliver for your businesses. Because ultimately, if SMEs don't adopt, I think we end up with a K-shaped economy where the big firms kind of race ahead and keep growing, and everyone else gets left behind. And that's not good for us as a country. I think we lose something of our national character if small and medium-sized businesses are swallowed up or knocked out by the great behemoths of the economy. And that's because all of you do so much for our communities, for our high streets. I often say that your businesses are the bridge between our economy and our society, and we really need you to thrive. I know from my own rural North Yorkshire constituency just how keen small businesses are to take advantage of this new technology. I've got dairy farmers who are using wearables and AI to spot mastitis in cows before it affects milk yields. I've got logistics firms who are using it to ensure that their drivers are using the most efficient routes. And I've got small hotels using it to do customer queries far faster than they ever could have done before. And for my part, I want to just do whatever I can to help small businesses adopt AI because it's good for you, it's good for our economy, and it's good for our country. And just as importantly, I think it will please my mum to know that small businesses aren't going to be having to pore over the books over the kitchen table after supper, but instead they can use that time that they've freed up to think about what else they can do to grow their businesses or just have a bit more time back for them and their families. So look, all of you are crucial to this AI adoption, and it has to be led by you, the leaders who are on this call today. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And that's why we've gathered together a great set of leaders to share their experiences with you all, to talk to you about how you can use AI to grow your business, the data that it needs to deliver for you, how human judgment remains essential, and of course, how to get going. So without further ado, let's crack on and start introducing our speakers and getting them to share their experiences. And I'm going to start with this theme I mentioned that this is not something AI is not something that can sit in the IT department. It has to be the responsibility of the CEO. And I see that going around the world talking to the largest company CEOs. They realize that they have to focus on it. They can't leave it to their head of digital or head of IT. And the same goes for small businesses. And McKinsey research shows very clearly that businesses get more out of this if the leaders are demonstrating ownership and commitment towards AI initiatives. Now, look, that doesn't mean that you have to have deep technical expertise. It's about awareness, it's about mindset, and it's about leadership. And leading by example so that you can bring your workforces with you and reassure them on some of the anxieties they have. So to start, I'm going to ask Sarah from Black Shuck Distillery to share her story, both in terms of how she herself started using AI, but also how she brought her team along with her. Sarah, over to you.
Good morning, thank you. So I'm Sarah from Black Shark Distillery here in North Norfolk. We're a small family-run business established in 2011. We just started out as a family project, really, and in year one we made just 300 bottles of sloe gin, and now here we are 15 years later, an established full-time business. And we have been really keen to embrace AI, obviously with some caution. As part of our initiatives within our team, we have used AI tools such as Copilot to help us to generate engaging content for social media platforms and so on. Amongst our team, we have members who are less confident with their literacy skills, their spelling and grammar. But using an AI tool has enabled them to use their knowledge of our products and their experience within the distillery to create some meaningful content. As a kind of an aside to that, a bit of a cautionary tale, we had an experience leading up to, or when the World Cup was on, where we used Copilot to create an image. And we asked Copilot to create something that brought together our Black Shuck brand, which is England's oldest legend, and connect that to the England football legends, just as they were going into their next game. What AI produced was brilliant. It was absolutely eye-popping. It was 6 people sitting around a table, all holding a Black Shuck gin glass, and there was a bottle of Black Shuck gin in the foreground. If we had posted this image, it most certainly would have got a lot of engagement. The people in the image had a very strong likeness to the likes of Alan Shearer, Gary Lineker, and others. So certainly it would have really got people's attention. But for us, there were some hidden risks there which made us hesitate. So first of all, we asked ourselves the question, would this even stand up to legal scrutiny? We would be using the reputation of other people to promote our own brands, and I don't know the answer to that. Secondly, part of our USP is being authentic and genuine. And I think anybody looking at that image after their amazement would have realized that it was a false image created by AI. And I think that could have done far more damage to our reputation of being authentic than it could have sort of impressed people. But possibly a better use we've had is by bringing together data from lots of platforms. So we use Clover app for monitoring the sales of people who, when they visit the distillery. We use Ticketing Hub to measure bookings for our distillery tours. Of course, we use Meta to track all of our social media engagement. And we use Ionos for our website sales and website engagement. What I've been able to do recently is use all their brilliant individual analytical data, combine it together to look for patterns and potential correlations, which has enabled us to recognize which of our marketing strategies are working best, which ones do we need to lean into, and which ones do we need to look at and improve. Now, as a result of that, we are seeing significant improvement in our sales and our visitor numbers, and certainly our engagement on social media. Those statistics that Ileana shared earlier were really interesting. Over the last 12 months, our visitor numbers have doubled, and our customer spend has increased from an average of £35 per person to £75 per person. So I think lots of things are contributing, but definitely our use of AI is part of that story.
Brilliant. Sarah, thank you. And I loved learning about your the personal mixologist that you and your team created for customers when they're on your website,
Oh, yes.
which sounded a lot of fun as well. Just 30 seconds, I'm going to try and keep us to time. In terms of your team and how you brought them on the journey with you, quick observations on that, just reassuring them that this was positive for them. And it sounded like you had a whole team effort and everyone got stuck in, but just 30 seconds on that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, it's absolutely about leading by example, lots of reassurance, and also never leaving them on their own with something, particularly to start with. So members of the team might create additional social media content, but it would sit there until I had proofread it. So just giving them that backup, but leading by example.
Perfect. Super helpful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And everyone can get some good recipes over
Thank
the
you.
summer for their cocktails. And look,
Thank you very
I think
much.
look, Sarah touched on something that was really important, and that's about not becoming an uncritical user of AI with her story about the kind of a Rested football mock-up for some of her advertising. Human judgment remains really important, and that's particularly important in the creative sector. So I was going to ask Nikki, who runs Soho Studies, who's been quite thoughtful about avoiding using AI where it replaces human creativity or where she can't do that confidently and with authenticity. And I think that's quite a helpful reminder to everyone. Nikki, can I bring you in just to talk a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, hi, thanks for that. My name's Nikki and our company is Soho Studios. We're based out of Edinburgh and we do embroidery, printing, clothing alterations, tailoring, basically anything with clothing. And so what's really helpful, or anything with fabric, and what's really helpful with us is when we engage with our clients, they give us their ideas, and so then we need to have a way to try and make sure that what they're saying to us and what we're wanting to do, there's a way to relate that to each other and to confirm what it is. And we looked into possibly using AI as a way to build up these proofs. But we ended up putting a hold onto it because one of the things that's always been really important for me in my 20 years of business is copyright, is intellectual property. And because a lot of the stuff with AI, especially the generative side of it, we don't know, or we know where it's coming from. It's using other people's work to sort of take these things up and to generate it. So we've just kind of put hold on that. And we found that even within the building that we're in, we've got a lot of artists that we share the space with. And we know an artist within our building who even has, in the last couple of months, has had her artwork stolen and recreated and resold on online marketplaces. And so we've just put a hold on that because I want to see something clearer about copyright law coming into that. Is that something that you'd be looking to clarify for these sort of things?
Well, I think that's something that the government certainly is looking at, and I'm sure there's some recommendations on that in the report. And I think the critical point, Nikki, similar to what Sarah says, is you've got to keep a human in the loop, as you've said, right? You can't just put stuff into these models and just take whatever they say uncritically. There needs to be a sense of judgment about what's appropriate. And not appropriate, I think, and that is helpful for you to have highlighted. I just wanted to also then kind of get onto this topic of data. And this is really important. Like most people, I think when they're using AI tools, including me, default to quite generic tools. But what makes use of AI more distinctive is when you can tell it more about yourself, your business, what you're trying to achieve, so it can be a much better thought partner for you. And I actually thought, Nigel, who's from a company called Pin Creative, has really done this very well, and I thought it was very instructive for all of us to hear a little bit about how Nigel has gone about teaching his AI more about his business so that ultimately it can be more effective partner to him. So Nigel, if I can hand it over to you, it would be great, I think, to kind of work through how you did that and any lessons learned for everyone.
Yeah, great, great. Good morning. Yeah, so my name's Nigel, who I was being told. I'm an independent brand consultant, so I work in the creative industry, and a lot of the creative industry are skeptical about AI. But I think because it's the creative industry, I've sort of embraced that idea of, well, what can it do? Not what should it do? I'm trying to make it sort of thinking a little bit deeper. So one of the things that I've done for sure, and it's only really happened, I reckon, in the last 6 months, it's been easier to do this, is ensure that all my content is stored on something that is visible to AI. So the AI reads my content before it reads the other content. So if you think about LLM, large language model, I'm creating a slim SLM, small language model, that actually keeps the focus back into what I want to talk about. So the first case that I can tell you about, I've used it for, my AI is called Silver, by the way. I'm not embarrassed to say that I've named my AI. Again, I think that's really important in creating a whole personality. But what Silver does is that she is now the chief operating officer for my business and has a bunch of different Silver chiefs that can actually break down my business and work, whether it's in the technology, whether it's in the finance, or the marketing, the sales, and help me. And the thing about AI now, compared to, like, say, 12 months ago, you do not need a lot of skills in prompting and all that sort of stuff. Point it at your content, talk in plain English, have a bit of personality to how it responds, and you'll get really good beneficial results. So yeah, that's I call it the prepared CEO, because the AI can read things almost in advance of you actually having to do any work. So it's always ready to work. So yes, that's the Silver Chiefs thing.
Nigel, that's so helpful and interesting. I hear a lot from people. They worry about, oh, my data's not in the right format. It's not all very tidied up. And the thing that I say to them, is look, actually, it doesn't need to be. I think there's a kind of misconception that your data has to be in some pristine format for it to be useful to AI. But, actually, you can just point, whether it's, Copilot or Claude
Yeah.
Cowork, for example, to various folders where you just store lots of things. And it's smart enough to figure out what's in there and then use it to be helpful. It sounds like that's largely what you've done. I mean, do you want to just elaborate on
Yeah.
that a little bit? Like this
Well, yeah, I think
misconception
I,
that
I
you
think
need very specific data for it to be helpful.
no, I don't think you need, again, you don't need a lot of depth. You need enough depth for it to be useful. But I do think that it does need to be organized a little bit. As much as I always have this thing, AI is quite lazy. So we have this assumption that it'll read everything everywhere all at once all the time. It doesn't. It reads things, gets a bit bored and moves on. So your trick is to make sure that you've organized the data so that it can find the most relevant thing that you're asking it, rather than just say, here's my world, read it and get back to me. Because it's, that's, we wouldn't do it like that ourselves. So, but yeah, you don't need lots and lots of detail. You need enough detail.
And and then the other thing, just quickly, that I really liked, which I've heard other business leaders use as well, is your kind of notion of the prepared CEO, which is where you can essentially have the AI take on different roles, and you can create an
Yeah,
AI kind of agent for to be a marketing person, an AI agent to be a finance person, etc. And then each of those agents is looking at the data that it is responsible for, but they can come essentially to a virtual
yeah,
meeting where you're getting different points of view from your different AI agents to help you as the CEO
yeah,
make an informed decision.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really important for small businesses, particularly. We always sort of get the analogy is we all have to wear different hats that to do different jobs because we don't have chief technical officers, finance officers.
Yeah,
I'm an
exactly.
independent, I have myself. So yeah, I even met someone who actually wears different colored hats, but being able to carp on, put them into little buckets really helps, stay organized and, keeps everything more relevant. It's got a better memory than I have, basically.
Yeah. Perfect. No, Nigel, super helpful. Well, very clear takeaways that AI is better the more data you can give it about yourself. It doesn't need to be
Absolutely.
perfect, but if you're just organized about where you save things in your folders, that's good enough to point AI at the
Yeah.
right things for it to be informed. And as you're using these various tools, what I've found and to say to people, a lot of time when you set them up at the beginning, as Nigel's done, you can give them information about you or the role that you want them to play, the perspective that you want them to bring. And then once it has that as a starting point, it essentially is going to bring that persona or that perspective to future things. So it's worth that early
Yeah.
investment in kind of data in to
Yeah.
get better output.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah,
Go on.
thank you. I was just going to say, but also, I think be playful, be creative with it. I can't get across that enough. Don't worry, have fun. This is an exciting, interesting thing, not boring work all the time. So have fun, be
Yeah.
creative.
That is
Thanks.
very, very good advice. Very good advice. Now, most people, when I talk to them about this, often they know that it's important, they know that they should do something, and they're trying to figure out where to start. And actually, the biggest mistake, I think probably the single biggest mistake that I see businesses make is that they start with the technology rather than trying to find a use case for it. And that's the kind of wrong way around. And the best advice is look, start with your business and look at your business and the business's pain points, for example. What are the tasks that take time, that are repetitive, that frustrate people, the bottlenecks that slow growth? Look at your business problems first. And then there will be a subset of those which really lend themselves to deploying AI to improve things rather than starting with a technology. And I think that's a really important lesson that I've learned. So I'm going to ask Bemi, who built a company called Sweet Dough Things from her own kitchen, actually, into I think the UK's first manufacturer of vegan, sugar-free candy floss, which is amazing, to just tell us a little bit about how she applied AI in her business and over time did more as she grew more confident in it. Bemi, over to you.
Morning, hi Rishi. So yes, I'm Bemi, founder of Sweet Dough Things. We manufacture predominantly sweets in the free from category. We started trading back in 2021 when AI was just being, became a popular phenomenon. And I always say to myself, anyone who's heard me talk say I am IT literate. So I didn't think I could ever do anything AI related because that was because I focused on the tech and, like you said, not the use case. And then once I decided, okay, I'm going to kind of explore this and have an open mind, I started quite cautiously, using it as an intern, drafting my emails and asking it to review my emails. And like you say, these repetitive tasks, emails that you type all the time, be critical about it. And over time, the outcomes, I realized the more the AI knew about me, Claude is now my best friend, the better results I get from it. So it does copies, it does product descriptions, because we're in several e-commerce platforms, corporate proposals, export action plans, things that, the capabilities that I simply probably couldn't afford before. Now we're also able to automate our processes, things like Shopify reports, QuickBooks, Clevio, sending out emails without having to send individual emails. Again, because we're in several e-commerce platforms, integration for efficiency and logistical simpleness, handling and consolidation. We've used it in so many ways. Because we're a sweet company, taste profiles matter as well. So when it comes to ideation, I sit down with Claude and we kind of juxtapose. Sometimes I ask him, is this my idea or your idea? So I'm sure that the outcome is what I want it to be. Again, we have a human mixologist, but Claude also is my mixologist. We need to know what trends, people are following, what flavor profiles work. So we've kind of used it. We use AI in different aspects of the business, from being almost an online intern to helping us with our automation and then ideation as well. So the more we've used it, the more confident we've become at it. And I think it's been a really great tool in helping us, with the business. The business has grown by at least 20% since we started, focusing a lot of attention on using AI.
Bemi, I was scribbling down. I thought that was such an inspiring story. Someone who's self-described as, tech illiterate or a bit of a technophobe or skeptic, becoming such a confident user. And the takeaways from me, from what you said, are, it's starting with, you said, the lowest risk tasks, actually, because that's how you build confidence over time. And thinking about it like an intern, and you said, what are those repeatable tasks, the things that you have to do again and again that are quite well defined, that work well for automation? And actually that confidence then allowed you to start using it for more and more. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that is a journey that many people will go on. And having heard your story, I think you'll inspire others to do exactly the same. And now I'm conscious we're up against a clock. So lastly, I'm just going to ask Sat to come in, and that's to talk about something else. Often people think about AI as something that can help save money, as we've just heard. Where can you make things more efficient? But also we should remember that it is a tool for growth and innovation, and ultimately that is where the most exciting opportunities over time lie for your businesses. And Sat, I think, has been using AI to do exactly that. So Sat, over to you.
Thanks, Rishi. So entropy's been around for about 12 years, and we've pivoted a few times because of the way the economy's changed. And our focus now is on turning heritage materials into new items through the local economy of makers and creators. So it's sort of, what has that got to do with AI, you might wonder? But ultimately what we do is product design and service design through AI. And as a business, what we do is create local jobs. We build supply chain resilience, and we cut waste and carbon footprints. And we've twice won Innovate UK funding to move our ideas forward.
Brilliant. And Sat, on specifically how you're using it to boost, in a sense, innovation and look for growth opportunities, not just save money. How did you kind of go through that journey, or where was it most helpful?
So there's been two areas. One is product design. For example, one of the organizations we've been working with have said we've got a ton of fiber optic cable that we would have to discard because we're upgrading buildings. What happens to them is that typically they get shredded or burnt. or landfilled, and we really don't want that to happen. And so they've come to us and said, what can you do with it that we can so that we can turn it into new things? And I put those same questions to AI to come up with sort of designs of things. So fiber optic cable, can we make it into meeting pods, for example? So the AI has come up with some designs, not necessarily all fully realistic, but they're good designs. Other materials include textiles, pallets, and so on and so forth.
Super. And you said there were, was there another area as well as the product
Service,
design?
service design. So, right, 2 years ago, I came across an AI tool that simulates the marketplace. You can do market research by profiling your target customers, and say, you can pose questions to the tool, to the AI tool, to find out what are the pain points of different segments of customers, which is amazing because it looked, very realistic. Obviously, you have to treat it with a pinch of salt with some of these things, but it was very realistic. And the other thing we've used is a tool that generated our sort of marketplace platform with no code at all. So again, it was rapid prototyping of things, and for small businesses, that's really key because we have to be agile. We have to respond to clients quickly. Large companies have deep benches of people who can do a lot of this, and we don't.
Yeah, super helpful. Look, a couple of very tangible examples there for everyone, product design, and then looking at customer pain points to identify sources of growth, new opportunities for you. And one of my favorite stories, I was talking to the lady who founded an e-commerce retailer in the UK called Monster, and one of a very similar story to yours. Like they had analyzed all their customer reviews, and the number one complaint about, I think it was a vacuum cleaner, was that it just needed something with a longer cord. And because of that, they just then came up with one with a longer cord, and it was a huge seller for them. But I think your point about mining the customer feedback for new growth opportunities, very similar.
And this isn't even feedback. This is polling future customers. So people that
Oh,
we don't.
wow. Okay.
So this is true market research saying
Yeah,
how would our product look like and what do we need to do to
brilliant.
service your pain points? Yeah.
Yeah, that's virtual market research. Fantastic. Look, that's super helpful, actually, and a very positive note to end on, focusing on the growth and innovation opportunities of AI, not just the cost-saving ones. So look, can I just thank everyone for your contributions? I know we had to do whistle stop through, but I think people would have got a lot of hearing from all of you. And I was just scribbling down some themes as we went. But Sarah, Nikki, Nigel, Bemi, Sat, thank you. Like, so a couple of takeaways for me is, as Sarah said, AI has to start with you, the CEO. You have to lead by example and similarly bring your workforce along with you, as Sarah talked about it. It's making sure that AI is something that they are helping to co-create. It's not something that's being done to them, and that they can see it's going to actually free up their time to focus on the bits of their job that they find the most fulfilling and remove some of the more mundane bits. And Nikki was very good to remind us about keeping humans in the loop. Right, we can't be completely uncritical of the outputs of these models. You've got to make sure that human judgment is always there, and we have a responsibility to do that, which is critical. I think Nigel, brilliant on this idea of data. Right, AI is only as good as the data that you give it. Being organized and then pointing your various AI tools at the information and data that your business has allows it to be more effective, and it can take on different personalities, roles, and perspectives, to help you as a business leader have more input and analysis to help make decisions for you. And then, Bemi, brilliant about starting simple, actually low risk tasks that are like what you were given intern that are repeatable. That you can automate easily is a great place to build confidence. And more generally, it's about starting with your business and the issues you have, not starting with the technology and trying to fit it around your business, which we always must keep that in mind. And then Sat at the end there, just reminding us that AI is a tool for growth and innovation, not just efficiency. And ultimately, all of us want to grow our businesses and do more. And this can be an incredibly important tool for helping us do that. So look, if I was going to, summarize all that and bring it all together, the good thing about AI is, in contrast to some other revolutions, you don't need to get off this call and go and spend a fortune on tons of new kit or install install things, right? It's you need a kind of laptop and internet connection, but more importantly than any of that, you just need a growth mindset, and that's what I think came through all of the contributions we had. It's a willingness to learn, a willingness to iterate. And that's because AI adoption is an iterative process. We heard that a lot. You start, you learn, you adjust. And we shouldn't be afraid of that. You learn by doing. And that I think is really important. And ultimately, if we do that, then I think that AI can be a small business superpower, right? Big companies, they don't know their businesses as well as you do. From the CEO down to what's happening at the front line, there are so many layers of bureaucracy and lack of knowledge, and it takes too long. You guys can move much faster and more nimbly. You know your businesses. And now with AI, as I said, it's a great leveler. It's a superpower for you that can really lead to a boom for small businesses. So let's not let the opportunity slip. That's why this call is so important. And if we embrace this, then I think we can look forward to a very bright future for British enterprise and British small and medium-sized businesses. So, Craig, I think with that, thanks to all our contributors, I'm going to hand back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rashid. And thank you to our famous five FSB members there sharing their AI experiences from East England, from Scotland, from London. So one of the things I'm always aware of is the power of FOMO, fear of missing out. So hopefully today plays a really important role in making sure there's no mystery about this. Start, test, learn, adapt seems to be the right way through. We've had loads of excellent questions. We had 135 before we started. We've got another pile of 30 or 40. So I'm going to pick through some of these and pose them to Ileana and to Rishi as well. So, I mean, one observation straight away is someone posted the ability to digest massive amounts of data and to digest it is a game changer. And I agree with that. But let's start with one that was about the concerns. So how do you, well, actually two or three, how do you stop worrying about AI as a small business? Because it's here to stay. And the three main concerns that I've spotted in the questions are, one is about copyright theft, which you've touched on, taking precautions before giving out your data. One of them is about AI and its unreliability. You can't fully trust its output. So I guess that's about things like hallucination. When Bami's talking to Claude, does it make anything up? And then finally, there's been a few comments about the climate crisis and energy use, particularly around the water and data centers. I wonder if you had something to say about that. So, Ileana, should I go? Let's give Rishi a moment to recover from that and ask you first for your points on those.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks so much, Craig. Yeah, look, I mean, I think when it comes to intellectual property and kind of sharing data with AI tools, I think lots of those concerns are very understandable. Something that we think would be really useful in this space is for that information on how a small business's data is going to be handled to be very easily available. I think one thing that's not always kind of front of mind for policymakers, but is much more front of mind for small businesses, is that it's often going to be the small business owner who decides which tool a business uses. And that's at the moment, that's quite a complicated decision to make. You're having to look at lots of different tools, kind of understand what are the terms and conditions, what am I consenting to with regard to my data. And actually, if that was all kind of held centrally by government somewhere in a way that a business could kind of filter and say, well, I'm happy for this, I'm not happy for that. And then to see which tool is going to meet their requirements. That's something we think would be really, really valuable. I might let Rishi speak to the kind of unreliability point. I think that's something you kind of touched on a bit earlier. I think to the climate impacts, again, having some kind of more transparency for the major AI providers around the like energy usage and water usage of their models, I think would be particularly valuable just to allow small business owners to make the kind of most informed decisions between different models.
Thanks, Ileana. Look, a couple of quick observations. I'll go back to this point I said earlier about having a human in the loop, right? I think because it's not perfect, and there are going to be hallucinations, because you still have to have regard to things like copyright and other things. You want to make sure humans are in the loop, and that's critical. So as you're building your workflows for the types of things that AI is doing, making sure that you've got human judgment at the appropriate points is important, and I think will remain the case. So that is the first thing to say. And then the other observation I'd make is, look, I get that there's anxiety, worries about GDPR and all these things, and of course they're important. But I was really struck by something that someone who runs a care home was telling me a couple of months ago, in how they've used AI in their care, both domiciliary and care home business, which is quite regulated, very sensitive data, and they've made it work, which tells you it is possible. I think the thing that he said, which really resonated with me, was, look, his employees are going to do this anyway, right? And because they can see that it makes their life easier, and that's not good, right? So if you're worried and they're not embracing it, like, what you're going to find is your employees are probably going to be doing it on the side themselves, and that then is a worry for data, leaking away from your secure corporate systems. And in his case, you've got people, care providers, putting together care package plans or care plans for the residents, or their patients. And that is sensitive data, and he needs to make sure that that stayed inside their secure data boundary that they had anyway, and they protect patient confidentiality. So actually, it made him embrace it even quicker, because what he doesn't want is for people to be off on the side doing it without any of those protections. And I thought that was really instructive, right? Because ultimately, if people have got a tool that they think is going to make their life easier, probably they're going to use it, even if they're not quite meant to yet. So you're better off just being ahead of that. And if he can make it work inside, as I said, a care provider with all the patient sensitivity, it gives me confidence that we can get through those issues.
Thank you. And anything on the sustainability point about climate, energy use, water use around data centers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's lots of stuff people can read online about how much of an issue or not that is. I think the water usage thing is much less than people think. I think there's a great stat about how its typical data center is less water usage than a golf course, from memory. But as I said, I think for everyone on this call as an individual, right, like, your job is to embrace the technology and help it make your business more competitive, right? Is what I would urge you to do. And it's kind of government's job to get the policy right on cheap and affordable energy.
Maybe AI will answer it itself at some point as well.
I'm sure it will help. Yeah.
So let's go big for a question. So you think about the growth mindset. Do we think AI can revolutionize access to finance? Do we think that AI can revolutionize fintech? Is that we're bringing together these growth priorities? Is that got huge potential?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it definitely does. And this is where, what kind of policy needs to keep up with technology. Like, obviously, it lends itself particularly well, because there's, obviously, with financial decisions, there's so much financial information about business that's available that can now be analyzed and used for predictive use. So that's quite helpful in figuring out products and opportunities for customers or for banks or other providers to service them. So I think that's an obvious area for growth. I think, though, this is where the policy doesn't, the moment is not quite there. And so we have all these consumer protections in place for who's allowed to offer financial advice and who's not, and that's very tightly regulated. And my general sense is that has to kind of catch up with the fact that AI can provide very high quality financial advice, and that is something currently that the regulator's looking at. Because we need to be pragmatic about that. If people want to use it, then it's a great tool, and we shouldn't, in my view, make it so cumbersome, the regulator getting so strict on what AI can and can't advise people or small businesses to do, when it's a fantastic tool. So I think some of these old consumer protection rules we have, or I said, who's allowed to provide financial advice, which are very tightly regulated. I think we probably need to update some of those rules and regulations for the fact that AI is an amazing tool that can do that, and in many cases better than lots of humans can today.
Thank you. Iliana, anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, completely agree about the potential of AI when it comes to access to finance and fintech more broadly. I think something that we sometimes hear from our members is a frustration when they're applying for finance, but they feel like they're not able to kind of really convey the kind of what their business is about. They're not able to kind of like really share that. And actually, the way that AI gives us the potential to use more data to access more data about a business when making for those institutions making those kind of finance decisions, I think could be really beneficial.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take two more questions. So one of them is a big global one, which is if you consider AI now is quite kind of narrow, it's a kind of weak version of what AI will eventually be. You've got general AI coming up and super AI when it becomes more intelligent and better at data than human beings can. And then you've got quantum computing. So what will this all look like in 10 years' time? Do we have any idea at all? Or is it one of those kind of transformative horizons where we know huge change is coming, but we can't define it yet?
Go on, Ileana, do you want to?
Well, I'm hesitant about being drawn on a prediction because I'm pretty sure anything I say will be wrong. I think the only thing we can be certain of is that we just don't know what's going to happen. As you say, Craig, there's so much going on. We don't know what quantum's going to look like in this space. I think, in a really practical sense, this just means all of us being kind of curious, open-minded, keeping our eyes open for kind of the new opportunities that emerge.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We talked about it before. AI is a general purpose technology, right? These things are quite rare when they, steam power, electricity, the computer, personal computer, they don't come along that often. And I think all of us are quite lucky to be living or running a business at a time when this tool has come along because it is going to be transformational. But look, whether that happens over the next year or two or the next decade, it is going to happen over our working lifetimes and change, I think, almost every aspect of the economy. As Ileana said, we don't quite know how that's going to work, and it's going to be compounded by other innovations, quantum being an obvious one, robotics being another area, synthetic biology being probably another thing that doesn't get talked about enough. And all these things are going to come together over the next decade, new sources of energy. So it's an exciting time, and you've just got to, as Ileana said, embrace it. The worst thing you can do is kind of put your head in the sand. Think it's too stressful, too difficult. We can't afford to be left behind. Other countries are grabbing it and grabbing all these things, and we want to make sure that we can continue to grow, to prosper, to thrive, to be competitive, and that means being very open-minded and being willing to learn and embrace these things. That would be my kind of general view on it, even if we don't quite know what the end point is.
And then a final one, we're running out of time, so this will be the lightning response. Given that AI growth zones, which are in place only in certain parts of the country, do we think those should be increased? Do we think there's opportunities for regions outside of that to collaborate and to develop it further? So go to Ileana for that first.
Absolutely. Well, I think we know that the benefits of AI need to be spread right across the UK, shouldn't be concentrated just in AI growth zones. I think what we do see is that some of those areas hosting AI growth zones are likely to see some increased pressures on some of their infrastructure, their roads, and so on. Actually, one thing that we're calling for in the report is that some of the money that developers will commit alongside AI growth zone developments should also go to local communities to help them, and in particular to help local small businesses to adopt AI meaningfully.
Thank you. And Rishi?
Look, maybe I'll abstract above the kind of growth zones thing, which obviously I'm not something I'm familiar with every micro detail of, but the FSB I'm sure can advise people. But I would say this: I think our country's, I think, defining challenge is we need more growth, and I think you said this, Craig, right at the beginning, and it's a good place to end, right? We simply, as a country, just have not grown enough for far too long, and all of the other things that we want, to people to have a better quality of life, higher living standards, better funded public services, like all of that is downstream of having better growth, right? If we have more growth, then everything else we want to achieve as a country becomes that much easier, and we can see a brighter future ahead. And it's not a political point, but like we as a society, governments, I think a lot of the time over the past 10, 20 years, whatever you want to say, 5, 10, 20 years, we prioritize lots of things over growth, right? And all of those things that we prioritize seem sensible, some social protection over here, some more public spending over there, a bit of regulation over here, whatever it is. But ultimately, all those things mean that we're just not growing as fast as we need to or should be. And that means we're going to get left behind and that all the frustrations people have are going to grow. So I don't know about AI growth zones, but as we like the whole country needs to be a growth zone. And unless we get the growth rate up in our country, I think, as I said, all the frustrations we have are just going to grow. And that's not easy because it requires us to prioritize growth over other things that we also like. But unless we do that collectively as a society, then we're not going to realize all our ambitions. And in an ideal world, as I said, the whole country would be an AI growth zone because AI is probably the most transformational thing of our moment that you said right at the beginning, Craig. It is probably the single biggest lever we have to drive growth, which we all need. So we all need to embrace it and embrace everything that it requires. And that is a relentless focus on adoption. You don't need to be creating the next best model, but we do just need to make sure everyone is using it as much as they can for all the benefits that it can bring.
Well, thank you very much. I've completely failed because we've overrun today slightly, but I think it was a great debate and really good questions. So thank you, Rishi Sunak, for joining us today. Thank you, Ileana, for your report. Thank you to our 5 brilliant FSB members, Sarah, Nikki, Bami, Nigel, and Sat, whose real world experiences I hope really kind of adds to everyone listening. I think I got from that things like be playful, have fun, be creative, use lower risk tasks to get yourself into it. Take the precautions you need to do. And one which was about Claude, I think it was Bami said that Claude is my best friend. I mean, our aim is for FSB to be that best friend. FSB is in your corner as you take your AI journey, and there are plenty of ways for to continue your AI journey with us. So if you're a member of FSB, you have access to our Learn AI for Business Success course, which is on our website. You can find it really easily alongside huge range of practical resources, and our AI hub, which is with Microsoft and the AI business school called Founders. If you're just getting started, there's a webinar on the basics of AI on the 20th of August. So you've got 3 weeks, and that registration will be posted in the comments in the chat shortly. So thank you for everyone today. I hope you leave with a little more confidence, not because it's easy or because you have all the answers, but because you've seen small business owners just like you adopt AI and make it work for them. And that's really what the confidence code is all about, knowing enough to have the confidence to take the plunge. Have a great day and goodbye.